Coming up, meet the star of the upcoming series Prey, and Pope Francis issues a historic apology to First Nations people. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is a proud supporter of Indian Country Today. Students at Cronkite News and Gaylord College at the University of Oklahoma cover Indigenous communities together. This important work is distributed by more than 100 news organizations. This collaboration provides a much-needed boost to coverage of Native American communities nationwide. Learn more at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start our newscast in Canada, where the leader of the Catholic Church has made a long-awaited apology to Indigenous people north of the Medicine Line.
I am here because the first step of this penitential pilgrimage among you is that of again asking forgiveness, to tell you once with all my heart that I am deeply sorry.
Pope Francis spoke to thousands Monday in the heart of Cree First Nations and Musqueam. He apologized for the role the Catholic Church played in the brutal residential school system, which separated Indigenous children from their families, cultures, and languages. The apology brought cheers from those in attendance, and it also brought some tears. Indigenous leaders reacted, saying, well, it was a special moment. It was also just the start of reconciliation. On social media, many were quick to note a headdress gifted to Pope Francis. Some questioned the decision, others made fun of it. In Canada, Pope Francis called for further investigations and for additional support of Indigenous survivors. Later in the day, the Pope visited a Cree Nation cemetery. The Pope's visit will last 6 days in total. It will also include more visits to former residential schools, and we'll have more on this story later in our newscast. Now to Arizona, where this year's Native American Basketball Invitational just wrapped up. In addition to plenty of res ball plays, the week of events also included a night of fun at a Nike store. ICT producer and correspondent Mackenzie Allen Charmley has the story.
Laughter, family, and a central place to celebrate basketball. The annual Native American Basketball Invitational had plenty of res ball, but it also featured music, fun, and even celebrity athletes.
The Nike N7 has been a partner in NABI since our inception in 2003. So this is our 19th year, and they always kind of have a very exciting element for our youth and for our athletes, and they nailed it again.
NBA player for the Oklahoma City Thunder, Lindy Waters III, supported the event, giving shout-outs to NABI players and even his former team.
Excited to see everybody out here. It's a pretty big group. I got one of my basketball teams, runners, make some noise, yeah.
Other professional athletes were also in attendance, such as Chelsea Dungy, who was assistant coach for the Troy Trojans women's team, and even past NABI players.
We also have Anna Lise Benali, who is a NABI alumni. She went on to play for San Jose, and then she just completed her first year pro with Romania. So it's really an exciting event where we have, our sponsors, our travel leaders come out, they meet the kids.
For Benali, the event is key to breaking basketball barriers.
So one thing, it brings the tribes from all over the nation together, so we are able to see each other and just see all the talents we have. I think with tournaments like this and just exposing ourselves, we're going to see a lot more faces like ours everywhere.
NABI's semifinal and championship games made history by being featured on ESPN for the first time. It's the type of positive growth the NABI president and CEO is looking forward to.
So we're really excited about the ceiling we just broke, and I just really feel it's only going to get bigger, and it's going to become the norm to see Native American kids in collegiate sports, not a novelty anymore.
In Chandler, Arizona, Mackenzie Allen Charmley for ICT News.
In the end, the Res Bombers won this year's girls tournament, while the Arizona Warriors won the boys bracket. And ICT sends a congratulations to all teams who participated in this year's tournament. Well, more on basketball. An Indigenous former professional athlete made their way down to Sesame Street. The children's show teamed up with Hi-Ho Kids to bring in Dene citizen Raineldi Becenti for a visit. Becenti is the first Native American to play in the WNBA. She met with kids and their favorite Sesame Street friends to talk about her love of the sport and what made her want to play professionally. Becenti even talked about how she uses basketball to give back to her community.
Ever since I finished professionally in basketball, my dad had always told me, no matter what, you go back and you give back to your community. So I do like free basketball camps. I go out and speak to kids about my story, the story that you're hearing right now.
You can find more with Becenti on Sesame Street's YouTube page. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, we have news from Canada, from Indigenous women's rights to the Pope's historic visit, and meet Amber Midthunder, the star of Prey. We'll be right back. Amber Midthunder is a Fort Peck Sioux actress from New Mexico. Growing up with an actor father and casting director mother, she began her own on-screen career early in life. She's been featured on TV series for both FX and the CW, and is now part of film history. Midthunder is the star of the upcoming Predator prequel called Prey. It is the first film to be released in the Comanche language. Hi, Amber. Let's just jump right in here. As an Indigenous actress, how impactful is it to you to be in an industry where more Native representation is needed?
That to me is, listen, like my job is I'm not out there like making laws or, like helping sick people or anything like that as far as like community work. But I do feel like I find meaning in this job in exactly that way, that I think the way that Native people are represented and creating even just like job space for Native people, like hopefully movies like this or shows like Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls are doing, where it's like showcasing Native talent and how valuable that is as a resource. Because it's like you go back and we are historically like storytellers. That's like a hugely untapped resource for specifically this. And then the way that what good or bad representation can impact our people is so huge. So to be involved in that is like that's my like Navy SEAL, I feel like purpose in like my career is I'm an actor, but really I'm doing this. So that's like, those are my goals.
You play the lead character Naru in the film. What parts of her do you see in yourself?
I think like she goes back and forth between believing in herself really intensely and then kind of wavering, like there's a point in the movie specifically when she's like, man, maybe I did like mess up. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And I feel like that kind of thing is something that I relate to a lot personally, where it's like there's moments, and I think everybody has that, where you're like, no, I know what I'm doing, and you feel so strong and so grounded in the direction that you're moving in. And then all of a sudden you get scared and you're like, well, maybe this isn't right. Like maybe I should quit, or maybe I'm whatever. And then you realize like, no, I can be everything that I think I can and everything that I want to be. And that's what I love about her. And especially like for Indigenous women to see as like a strong female figure, even as something as like a Predator movie, which is so like, it's like entertaining and all this stuff, but it's also like, it represents so much more than that.
In a press conference, you mentioned experiencing tons of new emotions throughout the filming process with COVID, filming in a different country, and even creating history. How were you able to handle everything?
It was just every day trying the absolute hardest. Like every day just waking up, and there was so much, I think for everybody who was involved, there was so much on everybody's plate. Like the mental health side of things, of like being in a place like that away from our loved ones and dealing with whatever in our personal lives that we were dealing with, but then also, you know, having this like big workload of like, to me, the representation element was like never lost on how important that was. And like, I wanted to do that. Like, for some reason, they picked me to do this, and I wanted to do that to the very best that it could possibly be done. And like, and then it was like, there's action and there's story and there's all this stuff. So it's like all those things, it was really just like focusing on the now, like what was immediately in front of you, and just like taking it step by step and like doing each thing that is right in front of you.
Were there any specific themes or messages within the film that you wanted audiences to take away?
There's a lot of elements that I'm really proud of. I think one is the relatability that I think and the representation. So having a look inside of not just an Indigenous culture, but like a period piece Indigenous culture. Like, you have kind of pictures of like the shows that I mentioned, that it's like Reservation Dogs and like Rutherford Falls. It's like, those are both modern looks at like urban, Native society or res society or whatever, but it's modern day. Whereas this is all the way back in 1719. And so to represent Native people as still very human and intelligent and filled with different personalities and different, dynamics between people, like that, I'm really proud of. And I think that's not something that you get a lot. And then just the idea that Native women have something to look at and feel like they can identify with and be like, wow, I can be strong and I can accomplish so much. Or like for res kids to like look at movies like this and have like tons of faces who look like theirs, that they can go like, wow, I can accomplish whatever I want to, and know that their space is needed and is valuable, like whether they want to be actors or writers or producers or run their own company or whatever. It's like, there's so much that we can do. And the more that space is taken up and that next generation see that, I feel like the more they'll believe that they have value. And to me, that's really important.
Do you have any advice for upcoming Indigenous actors and filmmakers wanting to get into the industry?
I would say to not be afraid to take up space, and to know that you are valuable and that what you have to say is valuable and your perspective is unique. Because right now there's like more Indigenous spaces being created, but it's not nearly done. So that resource and that perspective is so underseen, and it's so valuable, and it's so interesting. And also like tenacity, just like don't stop, keep making your own stuff and look at every resource that you can, like show up to casting calls, show up to whatever is out there. Like, just don't quit, because there's a lot of other people who won't quit and will get opportunities. And so why not you?
Amber, thank you. And we'll be right back. It has been 150 years since First Nations children were removed from their homes and placed in residential schools operated by the Catholic Church. And finally, the leader of the Catholic Church has apologized. ICT's senior editor Diana Hunt joins us to share more of ICT's reporting. We have a special correspondent, Miles Morso, who is on the ground there in Canada, but unfortunately can't join us due to a scheduling conflict. But we're happy to have Diana here. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So at a high level, tell us what happened yesterday. Of course, it resulted in an apology, but what exactly did the Pope embark on?
The Pope is starting a 6-day swing through Canada that's going to touch on all of the key Indigenous lands across the nation there. He set it up yesterday. He apologized in what appeared to be very heartfelt and emotional address. He also said, this is just the beginning. We need to work together to bring the justice for these injustices that occurred over so many years. And the reaction to his comment, there was applause, there were a few whoops, but it was there were also a lot of tears and a lot of people who were relieved that he had apologized, but now wonder what happens next. And there was some who felt he didn't go far enough.
So we know that a ton of Indigenous people were present, but who exactly was there?
There were a lot of survivors, family members. Many of the people we talked with had been to boarding school, or their grandmother had been to boarding school, or their grandmother and their parents, and they had been to boarding school, residential school, it's called in Canada. And there were also a lot of people who wanted to bring this full circle, I guess, for their communities.
You mentioned earlier reaction from people who were there in person. Maybe talk us through what Miles Morceau was able to capture and who he talked to.
Miles was able to talk with some of the Indigenous leaders who were there, including Roseanne Archibald, who is the national chief of the Assembly of First Nations. Take a look.
The other thing that, and I'm not sure if it was lost in translation, I didn't hear him specifically say that he was apologizing and saying, "I'm sorry" on behalf of the Catholic Church. He talked again about evils committed by Christians. He talked about being out of sync with the teachings of Jesus, but I didn't hear it clearly. And I really was hoping that those words would come out, that I am sorry for what the Catholic Church as an institution has done to destroy your communities and your families, and I didn't hear that. And so I know that today is about forgiveness for some people, and there are people who have come with that love and forgiveness in their heart, and there are other people who just don't feel like we quite got there today, and I'm one of those people.
He was also able to talk with National Inuit leader Nathan Obed.
The remarks were comprehensive, and the sincerity that the remarks were given in, I think, really resonated with me. I hope that others felt that as well. But also the understanding that this was about taking away our cultures, our languages, ripping families apart. That there was place for that in the speech, and the recognition that happened really showed the humanity in which this event took place, and I appreciated that.
There were also a couple of protesters there, including this one woman who Miles was standing very close to, who stood up and sang "O Canada" in Cree with tears rolling down her face.
We saw photos and videos of the Pope who, after he made his apology, went to a cemetery. What do we know about what happened there?
Yeah, he actually went there first. He went to the Ermineskin Cemetery, and the officials there just openly acknowledged there are marked graves here and there are unmarked graves here. And he asked for a moment of silence, and he prayed silently. The drums stopped, the noise stopped, and he sat in the cemetery and prayed quietly amidst the graves there. That was on his way to deliver his speech to the crowd.
I imagine that so many First Nations people are probably feeling pretty mixed emotions given that, they're hosting the Pope on their homelands for this visit that he started. Are people at all reacting to how heavy of a circumstance this is, or, how it feels to finally have this pilgrimage happen on their own homelands?
I think there was a lot of momentum to get him there, to get him to apologize. And once he got there and once it arrived, I think a lot of people realized, well, that's a big step, but it doesn't fix what happened. It doesn't address those issues. And I think now they're focusing on on looking forward and what can we do now to bring some measure of reconciliation, reparation to the people who suffered.
Speaking about reparations, we saw in the Pope's address that he also mentioned that there needs to be further investigation into the Catholic-run boarding schools in Canada. Do we have any indication of what that investigation could look like, and also how they're going to support survivors as well?
Well, one key issue is that many of the records held by the Catholic Church are secret, or they've been redacted. Another reporter, Indian Country Today, ICT, Marionette Pember, has been trying to get information where they blocked out the tribal affiliations of the children who died there, which means you really can't trace them back and figure out who their families are and who the relatives are who don't know what happened to them. And so the National Congress of American Indians has asked the Catholic Church going forward to be open and transparent and release those records so that the truth can come out. I think that would be an important step. It's certainly been an issue for us in reporting. And there are people who believe there need to be more mental health resources available to deal with the ongoing generational trauma that is a result of this.
Absolutely. I mean, so often we see people on social media as well reacting to this. Did you at all capture, what the discourse was like on social media?
It was really all over the map, to be honest. I mean, there were people who were angry. There were people who were still very angry with the Catholic Church and with the Pope, and there were people who were grateful that he was there and he said the things that they wanted to hear.
On social media, something that struck me in particular was a lot of people talking about Pope Francis, who was gifted a headdress. And it seems like, that reaction in general was very mixed, but tell us about that.
There was a lot of negative reaction to that, and there were a lot of people who thought it was an unnecessary thing to do and that it detracted from the overarching important elements of what the speech was about.
That's a great segue into my next question, which, of course, many of us south of the medicine line are noticing that the Pope's apology did not extend to boarding schools in the United States. And you mentioned, of course, NCAI President Von Sharp, who's calling for an apology. Are others also calling for an apology here in the U.S.?
Yes, there's growing momentum here as well to have the Pope come here and also apologize. It was the United States system that formed the basis for what was set up in Canada. And so we were the role model for what happened there. They're just ahead of us as usual. They've already had their Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They've had their investigation. They're ahead of us in finding graves, but we're getting there. And I think there is a growing sense that the Pope needs to come through here too.
The other thing that struck me about yesterday's apology, of course, was that there was other pretty prominent leaders there, like Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, he had a very minor role, but he was there. The Governor General of Canada she's the first Indigenous person to serve in that position. She was there. There were lots of tribal leaders. There were a lot of people sitting quietly on the sidelines to witness what was going on.
Diana, as we go forward, what will we cover next in this historic visit, and what can we expect from ICT's digital arm in terms of upcoming stories?
Yes, Miles is on his way to Lac Sainte Anne, which is a sacred lake where Indigenous Catholics have gone for years on pilgrimages to wash in the waters. He's going to be there. The Pope will be there. Miles is on the bus with the press corps there, so he's traveling there as we speak, and will bring us the story from Lac St. Anne. And we'll be watching as the Pope moves through the rest of the communities. He's going to spend a good bit of time in Quebec with some non-Indigenous people before he moves on. But we'll keep watching, and we're going to be covering this issue in ways that no one else is going to cover it.
We only have a short time left here, Diana, but there's something else that a lot of us are really thinking about, and that's the fact that there are Indigenous news sources like ICT, like APTN, who are covering this news. Maybe talk about the importance of the viewers watching and how important it is to get their news about this historic visit from Indigenous journalists and news organizations.
You're not going to get the perspective. You'll get a broad perspective of a global issue, but you're not going to get the impact in the local communities and the feelings and impact that it has in the Indigenous communities without ICT and other Indigenous journalists being there, I believe.
Absolutely. Well, Diana Hunt, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.